Seat 13F seemed insignificant, tucked away at the far end of the military transport plane. Passengers filed past, chatting casually with flight attendants and among themselves. Uniformed officers laughed over inside jokes, some tossing equipment bags lightly into overhead compartments, while others scanned their tablets and flight logs. In contrast, the woman in 13F moved with quiet precision, her footsteps measured, her posture perfect. She carried a modest duffel bag and a slim laptop, keeping her eyes calm and alert as she settled into the seat. Nothing about her screamed experienced pilot or hinted at extraordinary achievements. To anyone else, she was just another traveler on a routine flight. Her presence was almost invisible. She did not engage in conversation, did not reach for the overhead compartment unnecessarily, and did not fidget with her gear. Yet, there was something in the way she handled her surroundings that betrayed the discipline ingrained from years of rigorous training. She scanned the cabin with calm awareness, noting the placement of emergency exits, the alignment of the instruments at the front, and even the subtle reactions of the crew. A slight nod of acknowledgement to a passing flight attendant, a careful adjustment of her small gestures, but precise and deliberate. A few of the younger pilots took notice immediately. One of them, seated 3 rows ahead, caught a glimpse of her fingers gliding over her laptop screen with practiced dexterity, tapping calculations almost instinctively. Another observed how she assessed the turbulence warning lights and quietly adjusted her posture as if anticipating every minor shift in the plane's movement. They exchanged brief glances but dismissed it. Surely, it was coincidence. Yet a subtle tension lingered, a quiet sense that there was more behind that calm exterior than met the eye. As the plane began taxiing down the runway, the hum of engines vibrating through the cabin, the woman remained focused. She did not fumble with her headphones or check her phone incessantly. Instead, her eyes followed the instruments, her mind seemingly calculating variables no ordinary passenger would consider. Her breathing was steady, controlled, a reflection of training honed over countless hours in simulators and cockpits alike. Those who knew the signs of a seasoned aviator might have guessed, but no one on board could possibly know the depth of her experience. Her life before this flight was marked by missions few could comprehend. She had been an Air Force officer, one whose precision in the cockpit had earned her a reputation among elite fighter pilots. Her call sign, a code name whispered with awe in restricted circles, was unknown to the public. She had flown in dangerous combat zones, executed maneuvers that pushed aircraft and human endurance to the limit, and trained others to survive situations most could not imagine. Yet here she was, blending into the background, dressed simply, seated in the last row of a transport plane, appearing almost fragile compared to the hardened military men around her. Even the flight crew, experienced in recognizing the body language of trained personnel, sensed something unusual. A subtle awareness that she was not ordinary lingered in their peripheral vision. Perhaps it was the way she scanned the overhead panels, the way she noticed airflow changes and minor cabin vibrations, or perhaps it was the quiet confidence she exuded without arrogance. Nobody said anything, but a few exchanged fleeting, curious glances, as though they had seen someone familiar but could not place where. Passengers began settling into their routines. Some read books, others closed their eyes, and a few fiddled with devices, oblivious to the invisible presence in 13F. She, however, remained attentive, observing without appearing intrusive. Every movement was intentional, every glance deliberate. In her quiet vigilance, she seemed to hold the balance of the cabin in her mind, not in control overtly, but aware of the undercurrents of tension, skill, and discipline around her. As the engines roared to life and the plane began its ascent, she leaned back slightly, maintaining composure, her eyes scanning the horizon beyond the windows, a small, secretive smile playing at her lips. Here she was, just another passenger in seat 13F, invisible to most. Yet in the silent language of posture, calculation, and awareness, she was anything but ordinary. Unseen and unrecognized, she carried the weight of her legacy quietly, ready for the moment when her call sign would shift the attention of every pilot aboard, demanding respect in a way few could ignore. Before this flight, she had lived a life few could even imagine. Her calm demeanor, seemingly ordinary presence in seat 13F, was a stark contrast to the extraordinary career behind her. In classified circles of the Air Force, she was legendary. Her call sign, a combination of letters and numbers known only to elite pilots, was whispered with awe, a name that evoked precision, courage, and relentless skill. Though the world outside would never know, within the aviation community, she had become a figure who could command respect simply by stepping into a cockpit. Her career had been marked by milestones most could only dream of. She had flown missions in hostile territories, navigated complex airspaces under extreme pressure, and executed maneuvers that the limits of both plane and pilot. She had earned commendations for bravery, tactical expertise, and leadership in the most dangerous situations. Every takeoff and landing, every split-second decision, had been measured, calculated, and perfected through years of disciplined training. Yet the accolades had never made her arrogant. Instead, she carried her experience quietly, almost invisibly, like a well-kept secret. On this transport flight, she remained incognito. To the casual observer, she was simply a passenger on a military plane, no different from the crew or pilots who moved with confidence around her. Yet subtle signs betrayed her true identity to those attuned to them. Her posture, the ease with which she monitored instruments, and the instinctive precision of her movements were indicators that went unnoticed by most, but did not escape the trained eye entirely. A few pilots exchanged glances as they walked past, sensing something extraordinary but unable to pinpoint it. She had been a mentor as well, guiding younger pilots through high-stress scenarios, teaching them to anticipate threats, and instilling calm in chaos. Many of the top F-35 pilots on this very flight had likely heard her name in passing during training sessions or debriefings, though none realized she was right here. Quietly seated in 13F, she carried the same air of quiet authority that had defined her career, ready to act if needed but content to observe, calculate, and wait for the right moment. Her life had been filled with stories untold. There had been nights in uncharted skies, where the hum of the engines and the glow of instruments were her only companions. Decisions made in those moments could mean life or death, not just for her, but for her team. Yet here she sat, surrounded by casual conversation, the laughter of young pilots and the low murmur of the crew. The irony was not lost on her. After years of high-stakes missions, this flight felt strangely mundane, yet the undercurrent of tension was familiar. Even in this quiet anonymity, she remained hyper-aware. The pilots continued their light chatter, unaware of the invisible presence watching and silently evaluating their technical discussions. Her mind noted each minor misstatement of flight terminology, each minor hesitation, and mentally cataloged every detail. This wasn't about proving herself, it was instinct. Years of experience had trained her to observe, analyze, and anticipate. The slightest anomaly drew her attention, as it would have during missions in the most perilous zones. As the plane stabilized at cruising altitude, a few observant crew members sensed the weight of her experience. There was something different in the way she interacted with the instruments, in how she watched the pilots, and in the way she carried herself. It was subtle, a glance, a movement, a posture, but it spoke volumes. Even the most experienced among them could feel it. She was not just another passenger. She was someone who had spent years mastering what they themselves considered the pinnacle of their craft. In those quiet moments, seated in 13F, she reflected on her journey. The call sign she had earned was more than a name. It was a symbol of perseverance, skill, and quiet leadership. She had flown missions that tested every limit and had emerged with composure intact. And now, even as the plane carried her through ordinary skis, she remained ready for the moment her experience would reveal itself, ready to command respect without ever needing to announce it. The cabin hummed with routine activity as the plane cruised steadily above the clouds. Pilots conversed casually about F-35 maneuvers, flight patterns, and upcoming exercises, their voices a mix of technical jargon and humor. To anyone else, it was ordinary chatter on a military transport. But the woman in 13F listened intently, her sharp eyes flicking between instrument panels, overhead lights, and subtle changes in the plane's hum. Every detail registered in her mind, cataloged and analyzed, the result of years spent in cockpits where even the smallest mistake could be fatal. Her quiet attention did not go entirely unnoticed. A few pilots glanced at her occasionally, puzzled by the calm focus she maintained. She did not interject, but the slight raise of an eyebrow or subtle nod as she observed their conversation hinted at knowledge far beyond casual familiarity. She did not need to speak. The air around her seemed to shift imperceptibly. The discipline she carried was palpable, radiating outward like a low hum of authority. Meanwhile, the younger pilots continued discussing maneuvering techniques, unaware of how closely she was tracking their words. One debated the best way to approach a high-speed turn under limited visibility, while another described a theoretical scenario for refueling mid-flight. She listened, silently noting minor inaccuracies, small lapses in protocol and technical details they had overlooked. Her mind replayed similar scenarios from her own experience, missions where split-second decisions made the difference between success and catastrophe. She did not correct them yet. Observation came first, understanding second, and intervention only if necessary. Even the crew began to notice subtle anomalies. A slight hesitation here, a small pause there, as if she was measuring the skill of everyone in the room without effort. Her hands rested on her laptop, fingers moving lightly across the keyboard, jotting down calculations and perhaps mental notes. There was no visible tension, no nervous energy, yet an unspoken sense of awareness seemed to fill the cabin. A seasoned crew member, used to reading body language, caught herself glancing at 13F more than once, sensing that this passenger was different. A sudden alert flickered on the console, a minor turbulence warning, routine but enough to disrupt the conversation among pilots. She adjusted her posture imperceptibly, leaning slightly, as if predicting the plane's shift. Her calm response contrasted sharply with the subtle anxiety that rippled through the younger officers. A passing pilot noticed her hand hovering just above her duffel bag as though ready to act, though no one could tell what action. The moment was fleeting, but it marked a subtle awakening of awareness among the crew. She did not seek recognition. Her observation was instinct. Years of high-stakes missions had trained her to read the room, the instruments and human behavior simultaneously. The casual banter of the pilots, their confidence in technical theory, and their lack of awareness of her presence combined to create a quiet tension she could feel, though outwardly, she appeared serene. It was a tension born of latent respect, yet unformed and waiting for the catalyst that would reveal her true authority. Throughout the flight, small, unnoticed moments continued to accumulate. A pilot misused a term regarding flight trajectory. She adjusted her position slightly, almost imperceptibly correcting the error in her own calculations. Another overlooked a minor instrument reading. Her eyes tracked it silently, a calm but keen observer. Each small incident reinforced the quiet realization among the observant that something about her was exceptional. The tension grew, unspoken yet undeniable, like the silent anticipation before a storm. By mid-flight, the cabin's energy had shifted. Passengers remained oblivious, focused on personal devices or casual conversation. Pilots and crew, however, could no longer dismiss the quiet presence in 13F. She remained unassuming, calm, and focused, yet an invisible authority had begun to take shape. The seeds of awe were planted, anticipation growing for the moment when the ordinary passenger would reveal herself as someone extraordinary, a legend in the making, ready to transform perception in a single command. The plane hummed steadily, its engines a constant reminder of motion and altitude, while the younger pilots continued their conversations, unaware that every word and gesture was quietly scrutinized from seat 13. F she remained calm, composed, and alert, an unassuming presence masking a mind constantly analyzing every detail. The subtle signs of her expertise began to emerge, though the majority of passengers remained oblivious. It was in the smallest gestures, a flick of her wrist adjusting a stray strap, a fleeting glance at a console, the way her eyes followed flight data in perfect synchronization with the plane's movements. A turbulence alert lit up the control panel briefly, mild but enough to create a minor ripple of tension. She leaned slightly forward, almost imperceptibly, and suggested an autopilot adjustment in a soft, quiet tone to herself, barely audible. A pilot nearby paused, glanced at her, and raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Wait, did she just?" His words trailed off as another officer leaned closer, scanning her subtle movements. There was no formal acknowledgement, no fanfare, but a silent awareness began to ripple among the crew. Minutes later, another minor incident arose, a misread instrument that could have caused a slight deviation in altitude. She noticed immediately and, without speaking aloud, initiated the proper adjustment on her laptop, sending a note to a crew member, again so quietly that most passengers did not notice. The officer followed the instruction, correcting the deviation without understanding the source. A few pilots exchanged puzzled glances, whispers growing into quiet speculation. "Who?" One muttered and another nodded, equally uncertain. The air shifted subtly, filled with unspoken curiosity and mounting respect. She did not seek recognition. Even as her expertise became apparent, she remained focused on the task at hand, calculating, anticipating, and observing. Every correction, every adjustment was instinctive, a reflection of countless missions where seconds meant survival. The younger pilots were starting to feel it, that low hum of authority, the quiet confidence that radiated from someone who had been through far more than any of them had experienced. The realization was almost physical, pressing gently into the cabin's atmosphere. A few experienced crew members began to notice too. One leaned slightly, trying to catch a glimpse of her notes. Another subtly adjusted their own posture, acknowledging in silence the presence of someone extraordinary. It was in the way she absorbed information, processed it, and acted with precise efficiency, never calling attention to herself. The combination of humility and authority was magnetic, demanding recognition without a word. Even casual observers might have sensed it, though they would never understand the full weight of her experience. As minor corrections continued, the pilots' earlier casual confidence gave way to cautious attentiveness. They double-checked their instruments, subtly adjusting their maneuvers based on the hints she provided, though they could not yet articulate why. The cabin was filled with a quiet tension, anticipation building slowly like the prelude to a storm. Everyone sensed a shift, a change in energy, though none could yet name its source. She remained serene, almost invisible, yet her influence had begun to permeate the cockpit and cabin alike. By mid-flight, the smallest incidents had accumulated into undeniable proof. She was more than a passenger. Her corrections were flawless, her instincts precise, and her presence commanding respect without uttering a single directive. The pilots began to whisper quietly among themselves, barely audible, trying to piece together the identity of the mysterious woman in seat 13. The tension had shifted from curiosity to awe, a slow-burning acknowledgement that someone exceptional was on board, a silent authority waiting for the right moment to reveal herself fully. Even passengers, oblivious to the undercurrent of expert maneuvers and subtle tension, felt the energy change. There was a calm confidence that seemed to radiate from the far end of the plane, a presence that reassured yet intrigued. In seat 13F, she sat quietly, observing, guiding, and preparing. She was invisible to most, but the shift in awareness among the pilots and crew signaled the impending moment when her legend, embodied in a single call sign, would no longer remain hidden. A sudden alert broke the cabin's quiet rhythm. A minor systems malfunction flickered across the console, nothing catastrophic, but enough to demand immediate attention. The pilots exchanged hurried glances, hands moving instinctively over switches and panels. Tension crept into the atmosphere, subtle but undeniable. In that moment, the quiet observer in 13F leaned forward, calm and composed, her eyes scanning the display with lightning precision. She did not hesitate. Her years of experience demanded action. "I recommend adjusting the auxiliary power to channel through the secondary circuit," she said, her voice calm, deliberate and unexpectedly authoritative. The pilots froze, momentarily taken aback by her clarity. It was not the words themselves. They were correct and concise, but the confidence behind them, the assurance of someone who had faced far more dangerous situations than a routine malfunction. Hands hovered over panels as they glanced at her, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. A young pilot whispered almost incredulously, "Is she actually giving instructions?" Another nodded subtly, their curiosity mingled with disbelief. Slowly, the rest of the flight crew turned their attention toward 13F, watching as she guided them through a precise sequence of steps. Every movement was deliberate, every command exact. In minutes, what could have become a confusing situation was stabilized flawlessly. The cabin's tension shifted from anxious anticipation to stunned admiration. Then it happened, the moment that would etch itself into the memory of every pilot on board. As she stepped back slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a pilot murmured her call sign under his breath. The words echoed through the cockpit like a spark igniting dry tinder. "Iron Hawk." The recognition was instantaneous. Every seasoned pilot present stiffened, eyes widening. The call sign carried weight, history, and authority that demanded respect. Those who had flown alongside her before, or had only heard of her exploits, knew immediately the significance. The atmosphere changed. Casual conversation ceased, laughter vanished. Pilots straightened in their seats, alert and deferential. Crew members exchanged knowing glances, a silent acknowledgement passing among them. Even the passengers, oblivious to the intricate dance of authority, could sense the shift in energy. Seat 13F was no longer just another passenger. It was the embodiment of skill, leadership, and a legacy built through courage and precision. She remained humble. There was no flourish, no grand announcement. She had not sought recognition, had not flaunted her achievements. Yet in that moment, the room recognized her in a way words could not describe. The call sign alone carried history, countless missions completed, lives saved, maneuvers executed with unparalleled precision. She was both legend and mentor, an invisible force whose quiet authority commanded attention now that her identity was known. The pilots quickly adjusted to the new reality. Their earlier casual confidence had given way to focused respect, each action now guided by the unspoken presence of someone who had earned her place in the highest echelons of aviation. Even the youngest officers felt it, a mixture of awe, inspiration, and a subtle reminder that true skill often resides where it is least expected. Seat 13F had become the center of professional gravity, drawing attention not through spectacle but through quiet, undeniable competence. The minor technical issue was resolved swiftly under her guidance, the flight returning to steady rhythm. Yet the reverberations of her presence lingered. Pilots continued to exchange glances, their earlier conversations now tinged with awe and curiosity. The woman who had seemed so ordinary moments ago had revealed herself as someone extraordinary. The call sign Iron Hawk would echo in their minds for years, a symbol of authority, experience, and calm mastery under pressure. In those moments, the cabin transformed. What had been routine became a subtle demonstration of leadership, humility, and competence. The quiet passenger in 13F had shifted the dynamic entirely, commanding respect without raising her voice, without demanding attention. The legend was real, and the pilots, F-35 experts in their own right, understood with sudden clarity that they were in the presence of someone who had truly mastered the skis. With the call sign revealed, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted dramatically. Pilots who had been casually chatting moments ago now sat, their attention fully focused on the woman in 13F. The earlier tension had been replaced by a deep, quiet respect. Every movement she made, every glance toward the instrument panel carried authority, even though she remained unassuming. There was no need for theatrics. Her presence alone commanded recognition. The youngest officers exchanged quick, awed looks, while seasoned pilots felt a rare mixture of admiration and humility. She continued to guide the crew with subtle expertise. Small suggestions, delivered calmly, were immediately absorbed and acted upon. When a minor adjustment to the fuel routing was needed, she indicated the sequence without raising her voice. The pilots followed her guidance, executing the steps flawlessly, their earlier confidence replaced by reliance on her experience. Even the crew, accustomed to leading in high-pressure scenarios, found themselves following the quiet authority emanating from 13F. Her influence was invisible yet undeniable, shaping every decision in the cockpit and cabin. Her humility was striking. Despite the recognition her call sign commanded, she never flaunted her achievements. She did not smile with pride, nor did she make any attempt to assert dominance. Instead, she focused entirely on the task at hand, ensuring the flight ran smoothly and safely. Pilots who had once laughed and joked now found themselves listening intently to every word, internalizing her guidance without question. Her mastery of the environment, the instruments, the plane, and even human behavior was evident in every precise action she took. A minor turbulence alert rippled through the plane. While most passengers instinctively tightened she calmly scanned the readouts, noting the altitude and wind speed. "Adjust flaps to maintain level lift," she said quietly, almost as if to herself. Yet the instruction carried weight. A pilot nearby immediately, the adjustment stabilizing the plane with perfect precision. Whispers circulated among the crew. Even in routine situations, her expertise was transforming ordinary responses into flawless execution. The realization that she had done this countless times in far more dangerous scenarios hung in the air like an unspoken truth. Pilots found themselves instinctively deferring to her. Each decision, each minor correction was guided by her silent presence. She was both mentor and stabilizing force, shaping the flow of the flight without overt command. Even small gestures, like the tilt of her head toward a console or the brief glance at a calculation, became cues for action. The younger officers, in particular, began to mirror her composure, adopting the same calm and precision she exuded naturally. The room had transformed. What was once casual routine was now orchestrated with quiet, invisible authority. Throughout the flight, she remained observant, analyzing every action with meticulous care. Her eyes scanned the horizon beyond the windows, the instruments in front of the pilots, and even the reactions of the crew. Every variable was accounted for, every potential issue anticipated. It was not just technical skill, it was presence. She carried an aura of experience so profound that it shaped the behavior of those around her, compelling them to rise to her level of calm, focus, and precision. By the time the plane leveled out above cruising altitude, a subtle transformation had occurred. Pilots who had been casual and confident now approached each task with care, guided by the example set silently from 13F crew members who had glanced at her with curiosity, now did so with admiration. Even the passengers, unaware of the details, felt a sense of calm and assurance that the flight was under the guidance of someone extraordinary. In her quiet authority, the cabin had become a lesson in mastery, humility, and understated power. As the hours passed, it became clear that her influence would extend far beyond this flight. She had demonstrated that true leadership did not require theatrics or verbal assertion. Quiet competence and calm decisiveness could command more respect than any rank or title. In 13F, she had transformed ordinary routine into extraordinary precision, leaving an indelible impression on everyone who had the privilege of witnessing it. The rest of the flight unfolded with an unexpected sense of calm precision. The minor malfunctions and turbulence that could have ruffled even experienced pilots were handled seamlessly under her quiet guidance. The woman in 13F had become the unspoken anchor of the cabin, her presence subtly dictating the flow of actions and decisions. Pilots followed her suggestions with meticulous care, trusting her instincts even when they could not fully articulate why. Every movement, every adjustment she recommended, was executed flawlessly, reinforcing the growing awareness of her exceptional skill. The younger pilots were especially impacted. Their earlier casual confidence had been replaced with focused attention. They observed her reactions to every instrument reading, every slight fluctuation in the cabin environment. A minor misalignment in the autopilot system occurred, and she calmly indicated a correction, precise and concise. The pilots adjusted accordingly, and the plane steadied. A whisper ran through the cockpit, "She's flawless." That quiet acknowledgement carried weight, an admission of respect, disbelief, and awe all at once. Even subtle gestures reinforced her authority. She shifted slightly, suggesting an alternative course of action for optimal fuel efficiency. A pilot implemented it without hesitation, impressed by her foresight. Crew members exchanged glances, realizing that her suggestions were not only accurate but anticipatory, preempting issues that could have escalated without her involvement. Her knowledge was vast, encompassing both theoretical mastery and hands-on experience that only years of high-pressure missions could cultivate. She didn't need to announce it. Her expertise spoke for itself. Amid the technical precision, small human moments revealed her humility. When a nervous pilot accidentally misread a gauge, she offered a quiet correction with a reassuring tone, careful not to embarrass him. The subtle kindness alongside her competence created an environment where the pilots could excel without fear. They responded in kind, executing every instruction with diligence, increasingly aware of the rare privilege of flying under her subtle command. Respect grew naturally, unforced, grounded in competence rather than title. The passengers remained mostly unaware of the tension and skill unfolding around them. A few glanced toward 13F, sensing the calm confidence radiating from her, though they could not articulate why. The cabin was quiet, not due to fear, but due to the subtle magnetism of her presence. Even casual observers felt it. The flight had shifted from routine to exemplary. The plane was under the guidance of someone extraordinary, yet she remained entirely unassuming. As the hours passed, her influence extended beyond technical corrections. She guided the pilots with nuanced insights, minor adjustments in approach angles, coordination in timing, and predictive suggestions for turbulence navigation. Each recommendation was delivered calmly, almost as an afterthought, yet executed perfectly. The pilots found themselves instinctively deferring to her, adopting her measured pace and disciplined focus. What could have been an ordinary, monotonous flight had become a study in precision, mastery, and quiet leadership. Even when laughter or casual conversation attempted to return, her presence reminded everyone of the standard she represented. A joke was softened, a gesture of care more deliberate, every action subtly aligned with the example she set. She had transformed not only the way the plane was flown but also the mindset of everyone aboard. The lesson was clear. True skill required patience, observation, and unwavering calm, and she embodied all of it effortlessly. By the time the plane approached its destination, the shift was undeniable. Pilots moved with careful precision, crew operated with unspoken coordination, and passengers felt the unrecognized assurance that the flight was being guided by someone exceptional. Seat 13F had become more than a seat. It was the epicenter of authority, calm mastery, and understated brilliance. Her quiet influence had reshaped the cabin entirely, leaving those who observed it with awe, admiration, and a profound respect for what a single individual could achieve with skill, humility, and presence. The plane descended steadily. The hum of the engines softened against the calm rhythm of the cabin. Pilots adjusted flaps and throttles with precision, following the subtle cues she had instilled throughout the flight. Even the youngest officers moved with newfound confidence, their earlier hesitations replaced by steady composure. The woman in 13F remained seated, eyes tracking the horizon and the instruments, serene yet entirely in command. There was no need for overt authority. The respect she had earned through quiet expertise guided every action. The runway came into view, stretching long and solid beneath the plane. Pilots executed approach procedures flawlessly, a testament not only to their skill but to the steady influence of the passenger who had silently shaped the flight. Crew members glanced at 13F, recognizing in her calm demeanor a force that had orchestrated the journey with invisible precision. No words were exchanged, yet every acknowledgement of her role was present in subtle nods, shared glances, and tightened focus. As the wheels touched the tarmac, a quiet ripple of relief passed through the cabin. The routine landing, handled with technical perfection, had been elevated by her guidance. Pilots leaned back slightly, glancing toward 13F with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. One of the senior officers, long accustomed to commanding in the air, offered a subtle salute, a gesture unspoken but loaded with respect. It was the acknowledgement that she, seated quietly in the back, had been the true anchor of the flight. Passengers disembarked, oblivious to the intricate interplay of skill, discipline, and authority that had shaped their journey. To them, it had been a routine military flight, steady and uneventful. Yet those in the cockpit and crew area knew differently. The woman in seat 13F had transformed the flight through presence alone, guiding actions, inspiring precision, and commanding respect without ever demanding attention. Her impact was profound yet understated, a lesson in mastery and humility. As the plane emptied, the pilots gathered momentarily, exchanging whispers and subtle gestures. Stories would be told, retold in hushed tones of awe. The quiet passenger who had revealed herself through action and reputation, whose call sign Iron Hawk, was now spoken with reverence in the cockpit. Each pilot carried the memory of her presence, the lesson of calm authority, and the reminder that true expertise required observation, patience, and unwavering focus. She packed her duffel bag, moving with the same deliberate composure she had displayed all flight. There was no flourish, no dramatic exit. She passed through the aisle, a subtle smile tugging at her lips, acknowledging the nods and quiet respect of those she had influenced. Her eyes reflected a lifetime of experience, missions flown in hostile airspace, decisions made in split seconds, and the quiet satisfaction of work done flawlessly. She had arrived as an ordinary passenger, and now left as a living testament to skill, courage, and understated leadership. Outside the plane, sunlight glinted off the tarmac. She paused briefly, looking back at the aircraft one last time. In the minds of those who had observed her, she had become more than a pilot. She was a legend, a benchmark, a symbol of the quiet authority that only comes from years of dedication and mastery. The call sign Iron Hawk would linger, not as a name, but as a standard for excellence, humility, and precision. Even after she walked away, the atmosphere aboard the plane remained charged with the memory of her presence. Pilots who had previously questioned their own instincts now moved with renewed confidence, inspired by the example she had silently set. Crew members carried forward the lessons of her humility and precision. Seat 13F had held a hero, invisible to most but unforgettable to those who understood the weight of her experience. And in the end, that was her legacy. The extraordinary hidden within the ordinary, the quiet guiding the confident, and the invisible commanding respect. She had flown through the cabin like a shadow of excellence, leaving a mark that would resonate far longer than the hum of engines or the echoes of landing gear on tarmac. The legend of Iron Hawk had been witnessed, and it would not soon be forgotten.